Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm really excited to have on Jeff Carpenter. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Mason. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
It's been a while, actually. The last I saw you was probably at like the 2016 International Herb Symposium or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah, it's been a while, but you've been up to a lot. So for the audience, Jeff is the co-owner of Zack Woods Herb Farm, and he actually just re-released his book, The Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer. Did I get that right?
You did. That's it. Yep.
Awesome.
The revised edition is what the new book is called.
Revised edition. And you co-wrote that with your wife, Melanie.
That's it. She was a lot more, I guess she had a bigger role in the first book. And in the second book, she's kind of had taken on some different career things and gotten really busy. So she was very supportive and played a key role in like the technological aspect and helping with all the art log and everything. But she did not want to do as much of the writing. So the bulk of the writing in the second book is by my hand and my mind. But yeah, she was there by my side as always.
How did you and Melanie meet?
Melanie and I met in high school. So
wow.
My younger sister Jana and Melanie are best friends, and there's a 5-year difference between us. They're younger than me.
Okay.
So we grew up in a blue collar town, Barrie, Vermont, which is pretty close to Orange, where Rosemary lives. And what I remember is when Melanie was new to town, I think when she was like 12 or 13 years old, when she moved into town, again, a blue collar town, like people with kind of like alternative lifestyle backgrounds were kind of a rare thing. So when Melanie came into town and my sister started telling me about what she was interested in and this incredible woman who was her stepmom, Rosemary Gladstar, I got really curious. And so Melanie came over to our house and hung out, and she seemed really cool. And we had a really great friendship, kind of, big sister, older brother, friends, older brother kind of thing for a long time. But it eventually blossomed into a deeper relationship, obviously, and we got married. But it was through Melanie that I met Rosemary. Melanie just invited me up to Sage Mountain one time. I was really curious about the place, having heard about herbs and rosemary and the cool things that was going on up there. And so she brought me up there, and that's really what kind of opened the door of herbalism to me. And it was a magical experience. I remember the first time I walked into that house, the smells, the visuals, the meeting rosemary. It was like meeting rosemary is like meeting the living incarnation of a good herb. Yeah, living incarnation of a good witch. She's just, as you know, you've met Rosemary. You spent time with her. A really magical person. And that was kind of like the spark that really got me into this world of herbs. And so that's kind of a long story short of how I met Melanie. And then, 28 years later, we've been married and owned a few businesses and had a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I want to say, when I read your bio, you come from a long line of farmers. Were any of your ancestors herb farmers, or was it a different type of farming?
No, it's on my dad's side of the family. They were kind of like his great grandparents, I guess, in generations before that. I suppose you would call them just subsistence farmers. Where they were basically just kind of living off the land in order to make a living and maybe a little extra to buy some staples in the store. But then his grandparents became dairy farmers, and that's kind of how I was exposed to farming in Vermont. And his uncles were dairy farmers and some of the other relatives. So when I was a kid, I had the opportunity to go and visit some of these farms, and that was for me, like another magical experience going to the farms, because my dad was not a farmer and he wasn't really interested in that. He was a businessman, so he kind of like moved away from the farm. But every time we went to the farm, I wanted to spend more time there, and I was just really attracted to the land and the earth and the tractors and the everything, just the way those people were living, with their hands in the dirt and in the manure and everything was
totally
really, really attractive to me, even though I could sense from my dad's standpoint that it wasn't so much for him. So there was a generational gap there, I guess.
How does your dad feel about your work now?
Oh, he's super proud, and
That's awesome.
he's yeah, really interested. And he bought, I think he bought the first book. Having been to the farm and seeing what we did, and I've shown him around and asked a lot of questions, but I think he really read the book pretty much cover to cover.
Wow,
And
that's
the
amazing.
second book, yeah, and the revised edition has just come out, and I sent him a copy of that immediately, and he loves it. He's really interested, and although it's not in his like wheelhouse of interests or hobbies, I think just the fact that I have developed such a passion and interest for this makes him really happy. So yeah, it's all good.
So I've known of Zack Woods Herb Farm for many years now, ever since I've kind of been in the herb community, and I've never known what Zack Woods is named after. Can you tell us the story behind that?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of people ask that. In fact, so many people think my name is Zack Woods.
I used to.
It's kind of become like my alter alias or whatever. So Zack Woods has been dead for a few hundred years, I want to say. So there's a pond near us. It's a few miles away. It's called Zack Woods Pond. Okay. And my understanding of the history is that Zack Woods was a landowner in that area. He had a big farm, and the land is named after him. And the reason we named the farm that is because when I was a kid, I grew up around this area, and my grandfather would take me there fishing. It was a really well-known kind of like pond. It's a small pond for trout, and we would go fishing there and catch really incredible trout and go home and eat them. And that was a special time. I had a special bond with my grandfather there. So when Melanie and I bought this farm and we were trying to figure out what to name the farm, we couldn't come up with anything. So we just started thinking about local landmarks, and that was the first one that popped up, and that was it. But what we learned later from like a marketing standpoint, like it was a bad call, because when you're looking at businesses or herb farms from a alphabetical listing perspective, right. We're at the bottom of the list. Not that it matters, but some other people in business have said, wow, that was like, not a great choice. The business of your
especially in the days of the yellow pages, I heard that a lot of companies were named like AAA and stuff like that, just to be at the very tippy top of the yellow pages. So
that's it. Exactly.
I see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
I would love to hear the story of like the early days of Zack Woods Herb Farms, and then kind of like take us through the evolution of where you're at now with it.
Yeah, so Melanie and I owned an herbal product business that Rosemary helped Melanie and her twin sister Jen start when they were like in their early teens, and it was they were making tinctures and salves and face creams and lip balms and some teas and some really cool, really awesome craft handmade herbal products. And when Melanie's sister kind of moved away and took on a different career path, that was around the time Mel and I were getting together, and she and I partnered in that business, and we had really good success with that business. But it got to the point where companies like Whole Foods, which were kind of like different at the time, a little bit newer, were like reaching out to us, and they wanted like pallets of our Rosemary's Famous face cream. And we were making this stuff in a little teeny kitchen in our apartment in Waterbury, Vermont. And we were like, wow, what are we going to do? We have to like build or rent like a manufacturing facility, and we have to get, because the FDA had come and inspected us, and they were like, you can't do this anymore. You got to like tighten this stuff up. So we were kind of at a crux, like a crossroads. Like, what do we do? We were also like becoming a little like, not bored, but it wasn't like comfortable for us spending a lot of time inside and like doing the labeling and the calls and everything. And we really wanted to be outside. We're both very outdoors oriented people. And we were also having a hard time sourcing really high quality medicinal herbs, especially locally sourced. Our only good locally sourced medicinal herbs are coming from Andrea and Matthias from Healing Spirits Farm up in New York. And, they grow a lot of stuff, but there was a bunch of other stuff that we needed. And we saw that the quality that we were getting was, not only was it imported from places that we had never been, let alone barely heard of, but also like the quality was really low, and we wanted to make high quality medicine. So we saw an opportunity. We're like, wow, no one's doing this. No one seems to be growing this stuff around here. And there's so many of us that are herbalists that are making these products. What can we do? We like to work outside. We like to garden. And that was, there was a quick kind of period of time, like a spark. And we were like, let's try to sell this herbal product business and buy a farm. And we had kind of already been talking about like buying a house at that point, but we were like, let's buy a farm. And we went out on a limb, and it was like, really risky at the time, obviously, because we invested everything that we had into it. We sold that herbal product business to Sage Mountain Herb Products to a friend. And, when we bought this farm, it was like, it was what we could afford. It's not ideal agricultural land. And it took us a lot of work we had to clear a lot of the land and stuff. And one of the biggest challenges that we faced in the early days was the lack of resources for how to do what we're doing now. I mean, we had some really solid mentors, Matthias and Andrea, and other people who had kind of started pioneering the work that we're doing now and really started figuring it out just mainly through trial and error. And there are some other books. I don't want to say there are no resources, but they're kind of they're a little more limited in their scope of what they're kind of geared towards as far as knowledge. And the knowledge base that we were seeking was how to produce really high quality botanicals on a small scale and kind of work with smaller markets. And a lot of the books that we were seeing were either geared toward growing herbs in your backyard, which we gained a lot of knowledge from those books and they were very helpful, or the really big scale, kind of mass market type stuff. And there wasn't really a resource that was helpful for in between. So there was so much trial and error in the early days. It's comical in hindsight to look back and realize that I think the first year that we started growing herbs, we planted it was 70 or 80 different species of herbs, and we thought they would all do well. And as it turns out, 60 out of those 50 or 60 out of those 70 or 80 were not really suitable for growing in this climate, or were marginal from keeping your business afloat perspective. So we learned a lot, but it was fun experimenting, and both Mel and I had to work off the farm in those early years for a long time, and that was really challenging. I was working doubles. I was working farming during the day all day, and then going to a restaurant and bartending or waiting tables at night. And Mel was a teacher, a middle school teacher. So fortunately, she had the bulk of the growing season off. But then she became a middle school principal, so that kind of changed that. And that was around the time I was I can't do both. So and it was the time. This was around year 5 when we really started realizing a profit, or at least breaking even. And that was the time that I stopped working off the farm during the growing season and just kind of went at it full time. And that's when it really started. We started realizing that we could do this. The first 5 years were really shaky. We were losing money and had a lot of challenges, like composting herbs that we thought were dry that we put away and they weren't quite dry. And we would go to open the bags up a month or so later and there'd be mold in the bag. And so we learned a lot through trial and error and lots of hard lessons. But a lot of the lessons we learned were, lessons that have gone into this book, in the first book, that we're hoping other people don't have to make the mistakes that we made. And there are a lot of people having success. So that's kind of the long story short of how we got started.
So can you remind me Matthias's wife's name?
Yeah, Andrea.
So Andrea and Matthias sound like they were a couple of your mentors, and they live in New York. You're in Vermont. I'm not sure how long of a drive that is. But how were they your mentor? Would you drive up and hang out with them for a week and kind of just glean some information from them, or how did that work?
Yeah, when I first met them, they came to Sage Mountain, Rosemary's Retreat Center. So I had the good fortune to take some workshops and classes from them and just kind of get a sense of what they were doing. They were also teaching herbalism, which was really cool. They were teaching herbalism from an herb farmer's perspective, which was really awesome. And then Melanie and I, right before we bought our farm, Matthias and Andrea host, and I think they still do this. They host a workshop. I believe it's called Dirty Fingernails. And they have it's like a week-long or maybe a 5-day thing where they just invite people to come and just work with them, get their hands dirty fingernails, grow herbs, harvest herbs, process herbs, and that hands-on thing. So Mel and I did that, and it was just another just magical experience and really eye-opening for us, and gave us so much hope that we could have success doing what we wanted to do because we saw them doing it. And they started out as dairy farmers, and they realized that was a tough way to make a go. And they were really interested in herbs. So they kind of, did the same thing. They sold the cows in order to grow herbs. And to see them like start out with basically like a little hand rototiller and a lawnmower and just kind of like clearing little parcels of land and like growing incredibly high quality herbs and loving doing what they did, and their passion was just so like contagious. So spending time with them, it's a far drive. It's like it's probably, I want to say it's like 8 or 10 hours.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've driven to see them, but we went to their farm a couple times. They came here, and just lots of like phone calls and checking in. And what's cool is that we were both like learning from each other too at the same time. And that's how this work is. It's like continual learning process. Like, I don't think you ever get to the point. I don't know any farmer that's got to the point where they feel like they're at the, the peak of their knowledge. So it's great. It's a really, really collaborative relationship with them and others.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. So those early days, you were saying you were growing like 70, 80 different organic herbs. Then you realized some of them might not have like sort of like product market fit, or like certain herbs weren't popular or whatever. So maybe you took a loss on a lot of those herbs that you grow. Did you like over time scale back and then grow like more of, say, like peppermint and stuff like that? And then did you have to like ramp up which herbs you grew over time? Because I'm guessing you're probably back to around 70 or 80 herbs now. I'm just guessing, but.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started out with 1 acre that first year, about an acre, and with all those species of herbs. And then we realized like a lot of those weren't going to be viable. So the second year, I think we cut it in half, and we were growing like, maybe 30 to 40 different species, plants that we started sensing were going to be more viable and, easier to grow, easier to harvest and process, and better marketing opportunities. And so in the years after that, we kind of added an acre a year, give or take. So, by year 10, we were at 10 acres, and we never got back up to where we were growing 60 or 70, 80 species of herbs. We got to the point in the early, I would say, or like the mid, like around 2015, 2016, I think we had our largest size of just medicinal herbs, which is we had about 12 acres in production. 2018, we started growing CBD hemp. So that was the biggest size the farm ever got. We had 15 acres in production. We had 15 employees, but all along the period of growth, we really honed in on only about 20 to 25 species, kind of what we call our really core species, the species that we know have really good marketability and that can grow in our climate. We're here in northern Vermont, and it's not a long growing climate, although it's getting a little longer. So we're limited in what we can grow, and we have to use season extension. We have to cheat the seasons a little bit and cheat the systems in order to like grow stuff like ashwagandha and tulsi, but we've kind of figured out how to do that. But we're not really like, there are a lot of farms who have success with like bigger product lines where they'll have like 70 or 80 different species. And I think a lot of customers like that from a convenience standpoint, but that's not where we're at. We're kind of like want to focus on our core, like 20, and grow those as the best we can and grow the highest quality of those we can. And if someone needs American ginseng, which we tried to grow and did not have good success with because we don't really have the right habitat for it, they can get it from another farm, So that's kind of been the evolution. And now I should say that we're kind of on the downward trajectory as far as the scale of our farm. In fact, this past year, we only had 7 acres in production. And the reason being is that we, so we're about to enter next season is going to be our 25th year of farming. So for the first 20 years, we had, it was more challenging to sort out all the applicants that we had to work here than it was to try to find people. In fact, we didn't have to do any sort of like reach out for help wanted or anything. We just had so many people that knew about us, and whether they were friends locally or like people from other places that really wanted to work here. So we had always had an overwhelming amount of people wanting to work here, and that's changed in the last 5 years. It's been the complete opposite. We've had a hard time like finding good help, and that's kind of typical, universal, I think, in our country and different kind of like areas of interest and places of work. But it's tough for people to do seasonal work, I think, and that's what this is seasonal, you know what I mean? And to find people that are really committed to being here like April through October, and coming back year after year. We have had some people that have done that. In fact, our friend Erica has worked with us for, I think, 11 or 12 years now, and she's exceptional. But the turnover was really difficult, and finding labor now is hard. And Melanie and I are getting older. You know, I'm in my mid 50s, and Mel's a little younger than me, and we want to be able to sustain this kind of work to the point where we can't really do it anymore physically. And in order to do that, we kind of have to like take care of our bodies and take care of our minds. And bigger is not better for us. There were a lot of opportunities when we could have got really big, and we were leasing land from our neighbors, and we had the opportunity to really grow. And that wasn't really our style. Like what we found when we had, when we got really big, we had 15 acres in production, was that the amount of time that we were spending managing people and managing systems and like repairing equipment was taking away the core like passion of working with the plants, the reason that we do this work. And it was like the quality of life was deteriorating. So we're trying to find that balance of like quality of life and quality of work and quality of plants. And this like between 5 and 7 acre zone is where we see that sweet spot, and that works really well for us. And the demand for our products exceeds what we can supply. So that's a challenge that I think a lot of farmers would welcome. But fortunately, that means there are a lot of really great opportunities for other people to do what we're doing, because the demand is there. The market is really wide open for high quality medicinals, especially from a local standpoint. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and that jumping into the marketplace is like, a real easy thing to do, but there's good opportunity to do it if you can do it right.
Yeah, I was watching a YouTube video presentation that you did with Melanie and Rosemary Gladstar. You recorded about 8 years ago or so, and I heard Rosemary mention that farmers or herb farmers in general are like going extinct. I'm not sure those were the exact words she used, but are you concerned with the future of the popularity of the profession of herb farmer, or do you think it's going to start to gain in popularity?
No, I think it's, from my perspective, it's already gaining in popularity. The amount of, oh yeah,
that's awesome.
The amount of small to mid-scale herb farms that are popping up, or some of them that I'm just like learning about, tells me that this work is really gaining in popularity and gaining in the potential for having success as a really like, an semi-alternative form of agriculture that is really a lot more like environmentally friendly and sustainable as well, because a lot of the plants that are used by herbalists and that we're growing are perennials, and these plants really lend themselves to more permanent systems of agriculture. And it's a farming that's a lot easier on the land and a lot more sustainable for those regenerative practices. And a lot of people see that potential. And part of the work I do in the off season is I do consulting for kind of like young budding farmers or people that are farming, and they just want to kind of see what we're doing or run some stuff by me. And the interest in that, and just the volume of the people that I'm working with that are getting into this and having success or just really optimistic, tells me that this industry is really experiencing strong growth. And it's, again, the demand for herbs, sales of herbal products in the US is like multi-billion-dollar industry. I think it all lines up good for farmers right now, for herb farmers in particular.
I've heard Rosemary talk about cooperation versus competition. I've also heard you talk about that as well. So you're not concerned about more and more herb farms popping up all over the US and all competing for the same, like, say, customer or anything like that. How do you see cooperation versus competition in the organic farming community, herb farming community?
Yeah, it's different than some of the other agricultural models that I've spent time around, like vegetable farming. Like, I'm just going to speak here in Vermont. Like, the community of vegetable farmers here in Vermont are some really incredible people, but it's a challenging market because they're all trying to produce a high quality product, an organic product at a premium, and the consumer base is like more, I think, more likely to go to the grocery store and buy something cheaper. So they really have to be innovative, and it's a lot more competitive from what I see. And even, you know, my friends that see what we're doing and comment on, wow, you guys all, there's so much collaboration there, and you're not afraid to share your technologies, and you're gaining your knowledge with each other. And so I think the reason is that, well, first of all, I think herbalists in general, of which most herb farmers are really like community minded, really like open hearted, you know, empathetic people. So there's that. But I think it's also, there's so much room for growth and potential that collaboration and cooperation is the way that we're all going to have success. And there's no need for that competitive spirit because the marketplace is there. And there's so many large, small, tiny herbal product manufacturers, tea companies, whatever, bulk herb stores that want to buy high quality stuff, that there's enough to go around. And one of the biggest challenges is that, well, challenge from the herbal marketplace standpoint is that most of the herbs that we use are imported from other countries. And there's good reason for that with some species, because some species either can't be grown here, or there are culturally significant reasons why those herbs, take maca, for example. We shouldn't try to grow maca here because there are cultures in the Andes that depend on growing maca for their livelihood. But the fact that most of the botanicals that we use in the herbal products industry are imported that's another indicator that there's incredible room for growth and collaboration and cooperation. And because like almost all the other commercial crops that are grown in this country, there are a lot of resources. Like the FDA, the USDA has like a database for every crop you can imagine, every obscure plant, nut, seed, fruit, whatever, but herbs are not really in that database, which is really interesting. A lot of people think there's some conspiracy behind that, and it's possible, but we have to really work together, or we should work together to improve the way we do business and the way we work with these plants. And that's how we're going to have success. And that's another reason why we wrote this book. It's a collaborative spirit that we write this book with, to help other people like fulfill the demand that we're talking about. We can't fulfill that demand. The demand far exceeds what we can supply. So we want our herbal product manufacturers to have success, have access to high quality botanicals, so that the herbal products that our consumers are using are efficacious and they work, and then people believe in that, and it's all good for the industry.
Very good. And I do want to get more into your book, but I got to ask first. I remember talking to Elise and Jeff Higley at Oshala Farm. They were gung-ho about this idea about creating an event specifically for herb farmers. Have you heard about this, or is there ever an event that you've heard of where a bunch of herb farmers get together and share their knowledge?
Yeah, I think what they may be referring to is the work that APA is doing, the American Herbal Products Association. So yeah, there's some collaborative kind of like brainstorming going on with Michael McGuffin and that organization to kind of do what I was just talking about, which is help the manufacturers and the brands have greater access to the botanicals that we as like farmers of high quality botanicals are able to produce. I did have a really awesome collaborative experience teaching with them at a herb conference in Washington. I can't remember where in Washington, but Skeeter Pilarski. Do you know Michael Pilarski? Yeah, he's been on
the show.
Yeah, he's awesome. He did. he did an herb conference. Well, I think he did it for a number of years, but I think it was the last time that he had this kind of semi-big herb conference. Jeff and Elise were there, and I was there, and there were a bunch of other herb farmers there, and it was a lot of fun. And we had such little time together because we were all traveling and whatnot, but we could have spent just days and days just talking about plants, and we love to do that. We love to geek out about plants and tools and all that. So that was a lot of fun. I'm really impressed with what they're doing at Oshala Farms. They're like, what I feel is like the opportunity that more people need to consider, which is that like not getting huge and like just selling to the really like what I call the mass market, which is like the large resellers, the really large buyers. They're really like focused. They're doing larger volumes, but they're doing it at a really high quality scale, really innovative methods. I think anyone who's like interested in doing this on a like medium to large scale should pay attention to what they're doing.
Well, let's talk more about the book, the revised edition of the Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer. First of all, I'll say you mentioned cannabis earlier, and it looks like the revised edition has a new section on cannabis, but feel free to go in whatever direction you'd like as far as talking about the revised edition of the book.
Yeah, so the first edition came out in 2015, which is 16 years after we started farming. And again, the reason we wrote that book is we felt like people needed to have the resource that we felt was missing, like how to do this on a small scale, high quality. And we had a lot of fun writing the book. It was a lot of work, but after the book came out, the learning curve between 2015, when the first book came out, and the second book, the revised edition of the Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer, came out in 2023. The learning curve was like, we gained so much new knowledge and kind of like shifted some of our methodologies for post-harvest processing that we found ourselves so often. The common refrain was, oh, we wish we had written that in the original book. Oh, if we had written the book like a couple of years later, because there's all this needs to be in the book, and it wasn't. And we felt like we had missed out on some opportunities, even though the first book was great. So the first book was having really great sales. So I think it was like 2021, Chelsea Green publishers of this book reached out to me, and they said it's been around 6 or 7 years since you wrote the first copy, and it's selling really well. It's sold like over 20,000 copies, and if you want to consider writing the revised edition, now's the time to do that. We would support that. So I was really excited about that. At the same time, they wanted me to write a book on growing cannabis because they some of the people there knew that we had dabbled with the CBD hemp for a few years, and I told them, I said I didn't feel like I was the person to write the book on cannabis because I have not done enough work with that plant to feel like that's my area of expertise. However, I felt like it was worthy of writing a chapter on our experiences growing cannabis into this new book, which is what we did. And this kind of dovetails with one of your earlier questions about how did I get into herbalism. My first foray into herbalism and herb farming. You're laughing, and you can tell what I'm going to say.
I know what the punchline is.
When I was in college, my best friend and I were growing weed in my buddy's backyard, basically just to like extra spending money so we could go on Grateful Dead tour in the summer. But I loved growing plants, and I didn't know at the time that was a medicinal plant. Boy, if I had known then. But that was kind of my first introduction to growing medicinal herbs. But anyway, the new book has a lot of new information, including a chapter on our experience growing cannabis, not only like CBD hemp, but we've also done some work with higher THC cannabis. And now that is legal in Vermont on a recreational perspective, there's another really cool opportunity for medicinal herb farmers for some other products to consider growing, some other species.
Is this book for folks that just have, like, say I live on 0.1 acre, so very, very tiny yard now. Is this for folks that also just are interested in herb gardening in general, or is it more specifically for folks that are looking to have a business as an herb farm?
It's definitely geared more towards the commercial side of the growing of herbs, but there's so much information of it that is like crossover. I think, there's in the back of the book, there are profiles of 50 of the herbs that we've grown and had success with and how to grow those. I think that's a lot of information that's really applicable to more of like the hobbyist grower. Mm-hmm. And also what we've tried to do, and that brings up a good point, that what we tried to do with the second book was to make it a little more like broadly encompassing for both the really small scale, like the hobby growers, and a little more on the larger side of the industry to more of like the automated side. So I think we've succeeded with that. And I know there are a lot of people who have bought our book who are just kind of like hobbyist growers who wanted to have a better understanding of how to like dry the herbs properly in those real specific kind of conditions that lead to producing botanicals that are of high quality, and how to process, and maybe even how to like consider selling some of that in their local stores or to their local like medicine makers and stuff. So yeah, we've tried to make it, more broadly encompassing, and I feel like we've succeeded in that. And again, the larger side, like I went and toured some of the bigger herb farms and interviewed some of the farmers there and took pictures of and learned a lot about those kind of like larger scale methods. And that has also like, I think like helped expand the kind of like informational aspect of this book into those larger scale, although that's not what it's centered on. It's more centered on the kind of like smaller to mid scale. So, yeah.
Have you visited Trout Lake Herb Farm?
I haven't been to Trout Lake, but I have met, I'm trying to remember
Danielle.
Her name. Yes, Danielle.
Yeah.
And I taught with Danielle at a couple of herb workshops, and I learned a lot from her. She's an amazing farmer, and I have a sense of the scale of that farm. And to me, even thinking about how large that farm is overwhelming. It's enormous from what I understand. But I know they're growing a lot of really cool plants.
Yeah, I visited there a couple of years ago, and so they have two farms, from my understanding, one Western, one Eastern Washington. And I went to the Western one, and despite the fact that it's this huge, like massive farm, there was still this like vibrancy to it. Like you could still feel the energy there. And I was just so impressed by the entire operation. So I figured I'd just ask. I was just kind of curious based on something you said earlier. What's the goal of your book? What kind of influence do you hope that it has for people?
The goal of the book, again, is to really try to encourage people to enter this vocation, this career, whether it's a hobby or a career, because as I mentioned, there is room for growth in the marketplace. There's tremendous amount of room for growth. And the goal of the book was to fulfill the need that I think I mentioned that we were lacking when we started out, which is like a kind of a how-to for like just the nuts and bolts of how to produce high quality herbs on a kind of a market scale, and with really practical like knowledge was gleaned from us, like doing a lot of trial and error and hands-on, and to encourage, also to try to encourage more of the brands, people who are buying the herbs, to work with local farmers. And we're seeing more of that, not only because it's good from a marketing standpoint, like telling the story of the farm is always good for branding and people are attracted to that, but it's also good for business because of a lot of reasons. Like look at supply chain issues right now, like shipping containers of herbs from India or Europe or whatever are, 3 times expensive as expensive as they were before the pandemic. And a lot of that isn't just going to like go away. Like just the need for domestically sourced high quality botanicals is huge and growing. And we're hoping that this book is going to help to fill some of that need. That's kind of the main goal of the book.
Is there a specific place you'd like to send folks to purchase it?
Yeah, we really prefer that people purchase it from the author, which is us, because we make a little bit more money that way, and we'll get you a signed copy and we offer free shipping, but it's available through all like the outlets that you would normally buy books from, and there are a lot of like smaller brick and mortar bookshops that are carrying the book. And I would also like secondarily, after like buying it from the author, I would also encourage people to support those smaller like privately owned bookstores, because that they need help too, and they're great to support.
Amen. So that's ZackWoodsHerbs.com. And under the products tab, you'll see something called the book. You click there to purchase it. I'll leave a link to that in the YouTube description of the podcast show notes, as always. But I wasn't originally going to do this, Jeff, but I'm going to toot your horn for you, and I'm going to read a couple of these testimonials from some pretty well-known herbalists here. So Michael McGuffin, he's with APA. He writes, a dirt smudged copy should be within easy reach of every home gardener or farmer who grows or wants to grow medicinal plants. C. Stanley says, with a Green Heffa Farm, says, it will awaken your senses, nourish your soul, and guide you on an enriching journey toward organic herb farming success. And the one and only Rosemary Gladstar says, this delivers a powerful, pertinent, and hopeful message, as well as detailed information, innovative tools, and suggestions that offer a roadway to success for the small family farm. So,
thanks for reading those, Mason. That's another reason why we wrote the book, is because the amount of feedback that we've gotten from people like that, some of the bigwigs in the industry, and really incredible people who are doing this work, and some of the pioneers of like the herbal products industry. But the feedback that we hear from people who were thinking about buying an herb farm or starting a herb farm, and they bought our book and they've had success, and 5 years later they're like, your book is really what helped us get to the point where we're at. And that feedback is that's even more valuable than the little bit of money we've made writing the book too. Just that feedback is incredibly enriching. So thanks for reading those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you say there's a health benefit to being an herb farmer? I just want to say including like Matthias, I've met him, I want to say at the International Herb Symposium before. I just feel like every herb farmer that I meet just has such a zest for life, and their skin always glows. And I don't know if you want to speak to the health benefits of herb farming or not.
For sure. I mean, getting up, early in the morning when the sun comes up, and getting out and looking at the sun and getting your hands in the soil and working with these plants that are healing and magical, and that gives so much back to us in so many ways, is so spiritually rewarding and physically rewarding. It helps to offset some of the stresses that also go along with this work. It's not always easy, and there's a lot of things. It's mostly the things that are beyond our control that are the biggest challenges. It's like the weather and, challenges with the industry, with like FDA issues with some of the buyers and stuff, and contract manufacturers. But it's incredibly enriching and rewarding. And yes, it encourages a healthy lifestyle for sure.
Totally. Well, you mentioned challenges, and you've gone over a couple of them so far. It's funny, when I used to work at Mountain Rose Herbs, I had a feeling that a lot of the people that thought my job was me running through like a field of lavender flowers or something like that, when really most of it was spent behind a computer. But you literally do kind of hang out with the plants all day in a lot of ways. And I suspect there's a ton of challenges that go along with that, though. It's not just running through a field of lavender. But can you describe or think of a story of when just something was extremely challenging and how you overcame that?
Yeah, that's really easy, because it's just happened, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, this past growing season was, again, in almost 25 years of doing this, was by far the most challenging. Vermont experienced some really tremendously devastating flooding in early July. And fortunately for us, we're not like in the floodplain, if you will. Like a river did not come and like wipe out our livelihood. But instead, what happened was, instead of like the great deluge or the great flood, the river spilling over, it was like it was like the water torture. It was like death by a million raindrops, because it started raining in early July, and it really did not stop raining until early October. So we got 40 inches of rain during our growing season. And normally in Vermont, that's the amount of precipitation total that we get in a whole year, given all the snow that we get too. So we had our fields flooded, not from like river spilling over, but just from it raining and raining and raining. And nowhere for the water to go. And we had a lot of crop losses this year, and it was really sad because we couldn't do anything about it. You can always add water. So we've had some really droughty years, and we've managed with irrigation, but we couldn't really pull the water out of the field. What we're looking at now is ways to work to be more resilient for those kind of issues as far as drainage and stuff, and planting in different areas. But this year was challenging, and fortunately, it happened, at a place when our business is pretty well established. If something like this happened in the first 5 years, say, of doing business, it would have been really devastating for us, and may have shifted the course of the trajectory of what we were able to do as far as our business. But what we have learned though through the years is there's always next year. That's kind of like a common refrain in this business. And when there are challenges, you know that there are always some challenges, and usually the successes outweigh the challenges. But the rainfall this year was really unusual, and that's kind of a sign of things to come as far as the extremes of weather. So we're trying to, again, what we're doing a lot of work with this winter is planning to, again, be more resilient to these kind of extremes, because we know they're the new norm, whether it's like flooding or drought or whatever. It's just, crazy is the new normal here. So we're kind of preparing for it.
Yeah, I heard about the flooding. I want to say Sage Mountain was pretty affected by it. But
I think their road got washed out.
Yeah.
So
you're at the mercy of the weather, and this is a good chance to remind the listener, if your favorite herb store, herb farm, is out of stock of an herb that you're looking for, hopefully you're not getting too upset, because these herb farmers, they're at the mercy of the weather. And I just remember working at Mountain Rose Herbs, and people would always complain if we were out of stock of some particular herb. But I'm like, this isn't, some plastic commodity on some, assembly line or something like that. These are living, breathing plants, and it's difficult to keep these herbs in stock. So that's my little diatribe about that. But of course, the Herb Rally audience, they're all herbalists, so they totally understand.
They do.
But I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on being certified organic. Is it 100% necessary in your opinion? Is it purely good for the marketing of it, of the farm, or how do you feel about being organically certified?
I don't think it's 100% necessary to be certified organic. I think it's 100% necessary to use the methods that are, in line with being certified organic. The ways that I think people can opt out of being certified organic are that if your market is not such that the buyers who are buying your products really need that label, then it can be expensive. You have to pay to be certified. And now that I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent or a rant here, but I'll try to rein it in. I'll try to be careful. But now that the USDA, the NOP, the National Organic Program, has taken over the certification guidelines and stuff, it has really been diluted to the point where it's lost so much value and meaning compared to what it originally had. I mean, they're now going to be allowing soilless, like hydroponic production of berries and stuff, and it's pretty horrible.
Oh, wow.
There are also some really great organizations like our local certifying organization, Vermont Organic Farmers, NOFA, Northeast Organic Farming Association, who are really doing great work and trying to maintain the highest standards. But I think, again, it comes from a marketing standpoint. If your buyers need that label, and you think if you're going to be in the retail environment, your retail customers want that label, then I would say that's a good choice. But if you don't have to do it, I wouldn't. There's also, I want to give a plug for the Real Organic program, which is a new, well, it's not, I would say they've been certifying for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years now. Their standards are much higher than the National Organic Program. It's called the Real Organic Program, and we are certified by them. We have their label on our label, and their standards are so much more in line with what the pioneers of the kind of certified organic labeling and movement kind of had in mind, which is really not using Well, I'll stop the rant, but it's
You're good.
real organic. That's what it is. It's the real organic program. So I encourage people to consider becoming certified by them too, which is pretty easy and more affordable.
I'm here for the rants. It's all good, Jeff.
All right, good.
I will say this: we just visited a farm in Marquette, Michigan, called Seeds and Spores Herb Farm, with Leanne Hatfield. We interviewed her and toured her farm, and they're not certified organic. I want to say they were back in the day, but as you were saying, their community knows them as using organic practices. So they know them, they trust them, they love them. They're there every at the farmers market, and they're always meeting their customers and talking to them about their growing practices. So if you're kind of isolated in your community, it's not 100% necessary, is what it sounds like you're saying. Yeah,
that's it right there. Yeah, those relationships are more valuable than any kind of sticker or certification when you don't need them, I think. Yeah.
Well, I still have a few more questions. You got some more time, Jeff?
Oh yeah, totally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you'd be willing to share the pie chart. You don't have to give exact numbers or anything, but like of what the sales for Zack Woods Herb Farm is, like say dried herbs to larger manufacturers or distributors, I should say, versus like, you're selling to your local community, like tinctures or whatever. Like what's the pie chart of the income for Zack Woods Herb Farm, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me start by saying that it has changed a lot through the years. So in the early days, it was primarily retail because the volume of production was so low, and that was great. But on the retail end, again, it's like smaller units of sale that require a little, more labor per unit to produce. So the margins are a little bit lower on that, and you can have success with that through volume and through charging a premium for your product. And I just want to really quick add to any people who are considering herb farming. Don't base your prices on what you're seeing on the market. Base your prices on what it costs you to produce the herbs and pay yourself well for it. Not extravagantly well, but pay yourself well. And it also has to be in line with affordability for people in your community too. So that said, in the beginning, it was like mostly retail, and then we started entering more of the wholesale markets and had good success with that because it's more volume driven, and we were able to establish really valuable relationships with some bigger buyers who would establish contracts with us and oftentimes give us deposits on those contracts. So we had a little bit more money in the spring when cash flow times were hard. And that's something I recommend for people that are working on the wholesale end. Establish good relationships with your buyers and have everything laid out in writing and try to get deposits. It helps a lot. But recently we've been scaling back on our wholesale, and we're kind of like leaning a little more into the retail end again. But so right now, from a ratio standpoint, I would say it's probably 75% wholesale and 25% retail. In around like between 2015 and 2020, it was like mostly wholesale, like probably like 80-20. Yeah. So we're trying to like lean more into the retail because it's really hard getting all these emails and calls from our friends and our like longtime customers who want stuff and having to turn them away because we don't have like 3 pounds of nettles for them because we grew 2,000 pounds of nettles for this big buyer in Oregon or whatever,
Right.
So we've also seen that the demand on the retail end is really expanding, growing, and we want people to have access to good, high quality medicine. So it fluctuates.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. I would love to hear you speak to the importance of having a quality drying facility, because I know that's huge if you're going to be producing large amounts of herbs.
It's definitely one of the most important considerations for anyone considering entering this career or this field or already in it. Most of the botanicals that are used are dehydrated, as most herbalists know. There's also a market for fresh herbs, so that shouldn't be discounted. But since most of the herbs that we're using are dehydrated dehydrating the herbs in a really careful, thoughtful way, with the primary focus on retaining the goodness in the medicine, and also making sure that the medicine, after you dry it, is not necessarily or not possibly harmful because you haven't dried it properly and you've increased like microbial contamination. So these things are not easy to do. And that's another reason why we wrote this book, is because we're trying to help people avoid some of the mistakes that we made out early on. But dehydration it's complicated. There's a lot of water in plants. Most of these plants are like between 75 and 80% water by weight when they're fresh. And so removing that water from the plants without removing some of the real sensitive, heat sensitive compounds, especially the volatile oils, the aromatics, the things like you mentioned, like running through a field of lavender, that scent comes to us from aromatic oils, and they're very volatile, they're very temperature sensitive. And so finding the fine line between drying the plants at a high enough temperature that you're reducing the risk of microbial contamination, usually that's yeasts and molds, while also retaining those delicate compounds is a balancing act. And it can be done, on a small scale or a large scale, relatively easy once you figure out how to do it. But getting to that point where you figured out how to do it, developing the dryers, whether it's like on a small scale, you're like hanging herbs from the rafters in your kitchen, or you're drying on screens in your attic or whatever, or whether it's huge scale and you're drying in, enormous bin dryers like you probably saw at Trout Lake when you were in there. Yeah. There's a lot of complexities and nuances to the art and science of drying herbs, and it's something that we are continually learning and improving upon. And we feel like we've gotten to the point where we've kind of like built the machine, the drying machine, if you will, and we're really fine tuning it at this point, which feels good, because for the first like 15 years, we were just really trying to like build the ultimate dryer. And that's a lot of what, again, this new book is about, is like building batch dryers, which I feel is like the most kind of like universally approachable, universally useful method of drying herbs. Whether it's a small batch dryer, it's like the size of a refrigerator or even smaller, or whether it's a huge batch dryer and it's like the things you see at the huge herb farms like Trout Lake Botanicals. That to me is like, for people that really want to produce high quality botanicals, that's the way to go. Hanging them in rafters is okay, and the screens is okay, but the longer the herbs are exposed to the elements, whether it's air, light, heat, whatever, their properties tend to deteriorate. So the batch dryer technology really helps to kind of speed that process along, make it happen as efficiently as possible while retaining, again, those really delicate bioactive properties. Now, I should mention, some of the plants don't have, they're not as sensitive. So when we're drying things like roots, like echinacea, and we're drying plants like stinging nettle that does not have like those aromatic properties, like we can throw higher temperatures at them without damaging their quality. So there's a lot of things that you can dry that don't need such a careful technique, but with the sensitive ones, it can be really challenging.
So I'm understanding correctly, the book actually has a whole chapter on the drying of herbs. And does it actually like include like what type of facilities or how you might create these facilities on your property?
It does. Yeah. There's a whole, it's a really long, detailed chapter.
Awesome.
On post-harvest processing, dehydration. And what I've tried to do is really lay it out with as much detail as possible, and also make the information really scalable. Again, like you can build a small batch dryer or a big one, or you can just, again, tunnel dry herbs or whatever on screens. But we've really tried to give as much information as possible, and in a real kind of like how-to format. Like the book has, it's 400 pages long. It has like, I think it's like 200 pictures in it. So there are lots of detailed pictures on our dryer and kind of how we built it. So I've tried to give as much helpful information to people doing this as they can. And it's not a difficult thing to DIY, to do it yourself. There's also some companies that are just providing these dryers. You can buy a kind of a plug and play type herb dryer too, but they're expensive. So I encourage people to build their own who want to, save money, or they're starting out small.
Yeah, and as the audience knows, I worked at Mountain Rose Herbs for 11 years. I was never in the procurement department, but I just, having, peers in that department, I know how important it is for, like, say, when a Zack Woods Herb Farm or various herb farms when Mountain Rose Herbs is purchasing these herbs from other farms, the moisture content is super critical. So having a quality drying facility is very important.
That's it.
So, yeah. So just a couple more questions. I referred to this video earlier. I'll leave a link to in the YouTube description, but it was a presentation with you, Melanie, and Rosemary. And a question was asked about growing plants that you're passionate about to potentially popularize it to the general public. And I remember Rosemary gave an example of how Herbal Ed with Herb Farm was fond of fenugreek, so they would grow fenugreek. I'm just kind of curious, just for funsies, is there a plant that Zack Woods Herb Farm grows because of your passion for the plant?
Purely for the passion for the plant?
Yeah.
Wow. I guess, yeah, but it's also because it's a really great seller. Can those two both?
Absolutely.
They can apply in tandem.
Yeah.
That's great. So Tulsi, I'm just going to name Tulsi. That happens to be the plant that I have the deepest affinity for. Yeah. And it's also, again, one of our top selling herbs. Interestingly enough, when we first started growing Tulsi, I want to say this was probably 15 years ago, it was really pretty obscure at the time, and we had a hard time selling it. And everyone was like, what is this Tulsi? Is some type of basil? What does it do? And we had to kind of explain that, not to everyone. I mean, a lot of people knew about it, but some people were like, what is this? And we had to explain that it's just this incredible adaptogenic herb that is really tasty in like a tea or a tincture or what have you. And so for me, this plant, the plant comes to us from the Hindu tradition, and it's native to the sort of the Indian, the Indian subtropics. So it's a plant that's highly, highly revered in the Hindu tradition and other traditions for it's kind of like spiritual aspect. And I can say, like, from personal experience, they know what they're talking about because the plant has such a high vibration. It's truly, and I know people are going to say he's bringing the woo-woo in. I'm going to bring the woo-woo in. It is truly
love it.
A high vibrational plant that is so intelligent and so it makes you feel good when you drink it. Not only because it's bringing positive health benefits to you, but because it is truly, I think, a spiritual ally for humans. And I have a lot of reverence for that plant, as you can tell. And it's kind of my like daily tea. And just from just a medicinal standpoint, it's really great for it's an adaptogen. So it helps you adapt to stress, whether it's emotional or mental. And it helps to booster your immune system, and it makes you feel good and it tastes good. And so Tulsi is my favorite.
Yeah, they don't call it holy basil for nothing.
Exactly. Holy basil. That's the other name for it, or sacred basil. It truly is a sacred plant. Yeah.
I love it. And do you all grow the Kapoor and the various varieties, or just you grow one species of it?
We do. We grow. We grow three different. Yeah, we grow Rama, Kapoor, and then Vana, which is African basil. There's a lot of not controversy, but there's some discussion now, some really deep discussion about reclassifying some of the names of some of these plants. So Kapoor or Tulsi is actually, we're finding out, and I'm learning this through Rich O'Ketch from Horizon or Strictly Medicinal Seeds. He's a wealth of information, and he really knows his plant genetics and all that. He was the one that I think brought this to light to a lot of us, that Kapoor or Tulsi is kind of wrongly classified, and it's been recently reclassified as temperate Tulsi. And Vana Tulsi is also kind of being reclassified or reconsidered for what its original name and origin is. And this is it should be this way, because there's a lot of like cultural significance to these plants. So Vano Tulsi is, I think, is now being more commonly referred to as African basil. I don't know that there's like movement to have it like technically botanically reclassified, but Rama Tulsi is, to me, is the highest vibration, the most potent, also the most difficult to grow. So to me, these plants have a feminine energy, and she's a very delicate being. She will reward you with love, but she's not easy to grow. So similar to a relationship, I guess, if you will, with another human being.
There you go.
Yeah, in some ways.
I just got some holy basil from Oshala Farm, so you inspired me. I gotta make some tea after this interview. And speaking of Richo and like the vibrancy of herb farmers, that guy just has so much life to him. I love Richo, and I've been to Strictly Medicinal's farm a few times, and what an amazing, vibrant place. But so it sounds like you're a deadhead, or at least you used to be. If you were to recommend, okay, always. Is there any songs you'd recommend for the person who's not too familiar with their library?
Let It Grow.
Let It Grow. Okay, there you go. I don't know if I know that one. I have a lot of friends in the herb community who are hardcore deadheads, so that band comes up a lot on this show.
Yeah, so that's Eyes of the World is another one. So anyone who doesn't know about the Grateful Dead, if those people really exist in the world, those are a couple songs I would check out.
I'll have to go back and re-listen to it, but when I interviewed Susan Leopold, I think she recommended Eyes of the World. So
yeah, so I in the first book, we had, at the beginning of every chapter, we had a quote like from various sources or whatever. And in one of the chapters, the chapter on like field prep, I wanted to choose a quote from that song, Let It Grow. And the amount of work it took to get like the Grateful Dead publishers to give me the okay on that was cool. But I actually got to chat on the phone with some of the, I'm not going to drop any names here, but some of the like legends in the Grateful Dead world. And that was really cool. So the quote isn't in the second book because the publishers decided to have a different format, but there's a quote from that song in the first book. And that was just a little aside.
That's super cool that you had that experience to chat with them. Well, what's next for you, and what's next for Zack Woods Herb Farm?
What's next for Zack Woods Herb Farm is, again, for Melanie and I to continue to do this work for as long as we can, because we love it and we're so passionate about it, and the people need these plants. But we want to do it in a way that does not deteriorate or take a toll on our physicality and our mental health and our quality of life. So we feel like, again, we found that sweet spot with like the 5 to 7, maybe 10 acres, and having like 3 or 4 employees instead of 15 employees, and having some time off on weekends. Like that was not a thing in the early days. Like it goes without saying, this work takes serious effort and dedication to working long hours every day, provided the weather is okay. So we just want to keep doing this and have fun doing with it and have success. And we are also like kind of diversifying our income sources. So I work in the ski industry in the winter, and Melanie is now a legislator. She's in the House of Representatives here in Vermont. So that is also a kind of a winter gig for her. And our daughter is going off to college here in January, going to spring semester. So we're really excited and feeling good about what we do and loving it. And again, encouraging more people to consider doing this because there's room for it.
So that little girl that I saw in the YouTube video 8 years ago, is that
exactly
daughter who is now graduating? Wow, that's amazing.
That's Lily. Well, she graduated and she's getting ready to go to college in January. Yeah,
that's incredible.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, you painted a really good picture of what it's like as an herb farmer. You painted some of the difficulties, but also the advantages and just the good positive lifestyle that you could have as an herb farmer. So I know the Herb Rally audience really appreciates you being realistic about it, but also very encouraging that we need more herb farmers. And sometimes I'll ask on the Herbalist Hour, I'll ask what does the herb industry or herb community need more right now? And a lot of times the answer has been we need more herb farmers. So pick up Jeff's book, Jeff and Melanie's book, ZackWoodsHerbFarm.com, and I'll leave a link to that in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description, as I mentioned before. But this has been a lot of fun, Jeff. Thanks for hanging out with me a little over an hour. Did you have any like closing thoughts, or do you want to like give a final elevator pitch to people?
No, I just want to say it was fun, Mason. Thanks. It's good to see you. I always love talking about plants and herbs, and can get carried away. So
absolutely,
thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I appreciate what you're doing, and I hope your audience enjoys it, and people will consider growing medicinal herbs, because there's a lot of fun to be had and a lot of success.
Perfect place to end it there. Well, thanks y'all for listening. We'll see you in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour.
Thanks, Mason.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our Herb Rally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an Herb Rally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbrally.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.